What would you say if I told you that a desperate mother cried out to Jesus for help, and he said no, not once, but twice? Sounds harsh, right? Unloving, un-Jesus-like, impossible to reconcile with everything we know about his character. But it happened. And it's recorded in Matthew chapter 15 and Mark chapter 7. There is a woman in the Bible whose story shatters every assumption about how God responds to our prayers. A mother whose daughter was tormented by demons. A foreigner who had no right to approach a Jewish rabbi. A woman who heard no from Jesus not once, but twice, and still refused to give up. Her name was never recorded. Her face was never described. But her faith was so extraordinary that Jesus himself declared, "Great is your faith." The Syrophoenician woman wasn't an Israelite with access to the temple. She wasn't a disciple who walked with Jesus daily. She was a Canaanite, a pagan, a Gentile, someone the Jews called dogs. But she understood something that would change everything. She understood that even crumbs are enough when they fall from the master's table. And there's something I'll reveal at the end of this video. Something about the exact moment this mother spoke the words that turned Jesus' apparent rejection into the miracle she desperately needed. Something that will completely change how you pray when God seems silent. So stay with me, because the story of the woman who was rejected twice by Jesus but refused to accept no as the final answer begins now. To understand the Syrophoenician woman, we need to go back to the regions of Tyre and Sidon, Gentile territory, pagan land, miles beyond the borders of Israel. Imagine the scene. The coastal cities rising against the Mediterranean sky, their stone buildings weathered by salt air and centuries of trade. The smell of fish from the morning catch mixing with incense from pagan temples. The sound of merchants haggling in languages Jesus' disciples had never heard. Greek, Phoenician, Aramaic blending in the crowded marketplace. The air was thick with spiritual darkness. No synagogues here, no scrolls of Torah, no prayers ascending to Yahweh, just altars to Baal, shrines to Astarte, rituals that meant nothing, gods that couldn't save. And in one of those homes lived a mother whose daughter was being destroyed. The Bible doesn't tell us her name, it doesn't describe her face, but it tells us two critical details. She was a Syrophoenician by birth, and her daughter was severely demon-possessed. Have you ever watched someone you love suffer and been completely powerless to help? Have you ever tried everything, every doctor, every treatment, every prayer to gods who don't answer, and watched your child continue to deteriorate? That was her reality. Every single day. Her daughter's screams echoed through the house. The convulsions came without warning. The torment was visible in her child's eyes, eyes that should have sparkled with life, but instead reflected only anguish and confusion. She had consulted the priests of her own religion. She had made offerings at pagan altars. She had spent money she didn't have on healers who couldn't heal. Nothing worked. Her daughter was trapped in darkness, and she was running out of options. But then she heard something that would change everything. Whispers in the marketplace, stories from travelers. A Jewish rabbi named Jesus who was doing impossible things. Demons fled at his command. The blind saw. The paralyzed walked. He had power unlike anything anyone had ever seen. And then came the news that made her heart race. Jesus had crossed the border. He was in her region. The Jewish teacher who healed Israelites was now in Gentile territory. This was her chance. Maybe her only chance. But there was a problem. A massive, seemingly insurmountable problem. She wasn't Jewish. She had no right to approach a rabbi. The invisible walls between Jews and Gentiles were high, ancient, and absolute. Jews didn't eat with Gentiles. They didn't enter Gentile homes. They certainly didn't grant requests from pagan women. But when you're a mother and your child is suffering, social barriers become irrelevant. Religious traditions become secondary. Pride becomes expendable. And in that moment, one question burned in her heart. What if even crumbs are enough? She made a decision that everyone around her would have called foolish. She would find Jesus. She would approach him. She would ask for the impossible. Matthew chapter 15 verse 22 records the moment with stark simplicity. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly." But let's pause there. Do you see what she called him? Son of David. That wasn't a casual greeting. That was a messianic title. She was declaring that this Jewish rabbi was the promised king of Israel, the heir to David's throne, the one the prophets had foretold. A pagan woman who didn't grow up reading Torah, a Gentile who had no access to the synagogue, a foreigner who wasn't part of the covenant. And yet somehow she understood who Jesus was better than many who had followed him for years. She pushed through the crowd. Her voice rose above the noise. "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me." But Jesus didn't respond. Verse 23 says, Jesus did not answer a word. Can you imagine that silence? Can you feel the weight of it? She had risked everything to approach him. She had ignored social conventions, crossed cultural barriers, and cried out for help. And Jesus kept walking as if she wasn't there. That was the first no. Not spoken, but perhaps even more devastating. The silence that says, "You're not important enough for a response." Have you ever prayed and felt like God wasn't listening? Have you ever cried out for help and heard nothing but silence echoing back? That's exactly what she experienced. But here's what separates her from most people. She didn't stop. She kept following. She kept crying out. Her voice grew louder, more desperate, more persistent. The disciples were getting annoyed. The situation was becoming embarrassing. This foreign woman was making a scene, drawing attention, disrupting their journey. So they came to Jesus and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." Do you hear the coldness in that request? Send her away, not help her, not have compassion. Just make her go away because she's bothering us. That's when Jesus spoke, but his words didn't bring relief. They brought the second no. He replied, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." Read that again slowly. I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. It wasn't personal, it was theological, a statement of mission boundaries. His ministry had a specific scope and she was outside it. She was a Gentile. He came for Jews. Case closed. Any reasonable person would have turned and walked away. The religious leader had spoken. The boundaries were clear. She was excluded by divine design. But this woman did something that would shock everyone watching. Instead of leaving, she came closer. Instead of accepting rejection, she fell at his feet. Matthew chapter 15, verse 25. The woman came and knelt before him. "Lord, help me," she said. 3 words, direct, humble, desperate. Lord, help me. No elaborate theology, no argument about fairness, no demand for equal treatment, just a mother's cry for her suffering child. And then came the moment that would test her faith beyond anything she had imagined. Jesus looked at her kneeling at his feet, and he said words that must have felt like a blade piercing her heart. "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." The children were the Jews. The bread was the blessing. And the dogs, that was her. Jesus had just compared her to a dog, an animal Jews considered unclean, unworthy, beneath human dignity. To anyone listening, that was the final rejection. Jesus had drawn a line, and she was on the wrong side of it. But what happened next would go down in history as one of the most extraordinary demonstrations of faith Jesus had ever encountered. Because while everyone else saw an insult, she saw an opportunity. While the disciples saw a foreigner who needed to be sent away, she saw something they missed entirely. She saw that even in what sounded like rejection, there was a crack in the door, and she was about to push it wide open with 7 words that would change everything. Before we continue, if this story is gripping your heart, if you're beginning to see yourself in this mother's desperate persistence, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because what happens next will reveal the exact words that turned apparent rejection into miraculous breakthrough. And you'll want more stories like this, stories of impossible faith, refused silence, and the moment when God responds to those who won't give up. Every week, we bring you forgotten biblical characters with transformative lessons, real people who faced real rejection but discovered that even crumbs are enough when they come from God's table. Now here's what most people miss about this moment. When Jesus compared her to a dog, everyone watching assumed the conversation was over. The disciples relaxed. The crowd began to disperse. Even she might have felt the sting of those words. Dogs, unclean, unworthy. But something extraordinary happened in that split second. She didn't hear an insult. She heard an opportunity. She didn't see a closed door. She saw a crack of light. And she was about to teach everyone watching what great faith actually looks like. Picture the moment in vivid, cinematic detail. The dust settling in the narrow street, golden particles catching the afternoon sunlight, Jesus standing tall, his eyes fixed on this kneeling woman, the disciples shifting uncomfortably, the woman's knees pressed into the rough stones, her hands clasped together, trembling, her throat tight with emotion but her mind razor-sharp. The crowd forming a circle, some faces showing pity, others disdain. The air thick with tension, every person holding their breath, her heart pounding, her mother's love overriding every instinct to protect her dignity. And then she spoke words that would echo through eternity. Matthew chapter 15, verse 27. She said, "Yes, it is, Lord. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Stop right there. Do you realize how brilliant that answer is? She didn't deny the metaphor. She didn't argue. She didn't demand equality. She didn't even get offended. Instead, she accepted her position as an outsider. She acknowledged she wasn't one of the covenant children, but within that humility, she demonstrated something revolutionary. Even the dogs get the crumbs, and crumbs from the master's table are enough to perform miracles. She wasn't asking for the whole loaf. She wasn't claiming the children's rights. She was simply saying, if even the little dogs receive the leftovers, there's hope for me too. I don't need the full blessing. Just a crumb of your power is enough. Can you imagine the shift that happened? The disciples fell silent. The crowd leaned in. Jesus smiled, because she had taken his metaphor and turned it into a declaration of faith. This is faith that understands both God's sovereignty and his compassion. Faith that doesn't deserve blessing, but believes in mercy anyway. Until this moment, everyone assumed rejection. But this time, something was different. This time, a Gentile woman demonstrated faith that surpassed Israel's. This time, the outsider understood grace better than the insiders. This time, humble persistence broke through centuries-old barriers. Jesus was impressed. This woman with no scripture, no prophets, no synagogue training. She demonstrated something rare, a faith that transcends culture and ethnicity, a faith that refuses to give up. And then Jesus spoke the words. Mark chapter 7, verse 29. Then he told her, "For such a reply you may go. The demon has left your daughter." Matthew chapter 15, verse 28. "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." Great is your faith, not persistence, not courage, but faith. Jesus recognized something that touched God's heart, faith that believes even crumbs are enough. And instantly, without ritual, without laying on of hands, without Jesus traveling to her home, the miracle happened. Miles away, the demon fled. The convulsions stopped. The scream ceased. Peace came. Mark chapter 7, verse 30. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Can you imagine that walk home? Hope and anxiety mixing with each step. And then she opened the door. Her daughter, peaceful, calm, whole. The impossible became reality because even crumbs are enough. But here's what most people miss. This wasn't just about one healing. The Syrophoenician woman was a living demonstration of something revolutionary about God's kingdom. God could have kept his blessings exclusive to Israel, but he didn't. Why? Because God's mercy doesn't respect the boundaries we build. His compassion doesn't stop at the borders we draw. His love doesn't check your background before responding to genuine faith. What does this mean for you? Just as she received mercy despite being outside the covenant, Jesus extends grace to all who come in faith, regardless of where you're from or what you've done. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 14 through 16. For he himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace. The wall between Jew and Gentile, Jesus was tearing it down. And this woman received a preview of the gospel for all nations. Not because she was Jewish, but because she had faith. Not because she deserved it, but because God is merciful. Not because she was perfect, but because she believed even crumbs are enough. So what do we learn from the Syrophoenician woman? First, don't let apparent rejection be your final answer. She heard no twice, once through silence, once through words. But she didn't interpret those as final. She persisted. Have you been praying and God seems silent? Have you asked for help and heard what sounds like no? What if that's not the end? What if God is inviting you to demonstrate persistent faith? You don't need perfect theology or the right background. You just need to believe that even crumbs are enough. If you're ready to give up because of silence, don't. She heard silence too and kept crying out until Jesus responded. Second, humility and boldness aren't opposites, they're partners. She didn't demand rights or argue unfairness. She accepted her position outside the covenant. But within that humility, she was bold. She took Jesus' metaphor and used it as her request. You're right, I'm not one of the children, but even the dogs eat crumbs. I'm asking for just a crumb, because even that is enough. Doesn't that challenge how you pray? That's prayer that moves heaven, not arrogant demands, but humble boldness that says, I don't deserve this, but I believe you're merciful enough to help anyway. Third, your faith doesn't have to be perfect to be effective. She had no religious training, no memorized scripture, no knowledge of Jewish law, just simple, persistent faith that Jesus could heal her daughter. And Jesus called it great. Not because it was sophisticated, but because it was genuine and unwavering. She believed even crumbs are enough, and that belief moved God's heart. Have you been thinking your faith is too small? Have you been waiting to understand everything before approaching God? What if the faith you have right now, small, imperfect, full of questions, is exactly what God honors? The question isn't, do I have enough faith? The question is, will I trust that what little faith I have is enough? Because even crumbs are enough. If this story has touched your heart, do 3 things. First, leave a comment below and write, even crumbs are enough. Because maybe today you finally stop believing you need everything perfect before God can use you. Maybe today you realize that the little faith you have, the small resources you possess, they're enough when they come from God's table. Your faith doesn't have to be giant, it just has to be real. Even a crumb of faith, a whisper of hope, a tiny belief that God hears you, that's enough. Second, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every week we bring you forgotten biblical characters with powerful lessons, real stories of rejected people who refuse to quit, messages that prove God honors humble, persistent faith over perfect credentials. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who thinks they don't have enough faith, someone who feels their prayers are too small, someone about to give up because God seems silent, someone who needs to know that even crumbs are enough. Think about it. The Syrophoenician woman started that day as a desperate mother with a demon-possessed daughter, an outsider with no right to approach a rabbi, no claim on mercy, no reason to expect help. She ended with her daughter healed, her faith praised by Jesus, and her story recorded as an example for billions. What changed? She was still a Gentile, still an outsider, still someone who shouldn't have received blessing by religious standards. But she had faith. Faith that persisted through silence, faith that endured rejection, faith that believed even crumbs are enough. That's the difference. Not your perfection, but your persistence. Not your credentials, but your faith. Thousands of years have passed since she knelt in that Gentile city, but the message echoes unchanged. God's mercy extends beyond every boundary we build. His compassion reaches farther than any wall we construct. His love doesn't check your background before responding to genuine faith. The same Jesus who said, "Great is your faith," to a Gentile woman, says it to anyone who approaches him with humble, persistent trust. Today, God is asking you, will you trust me even when it seems like I'm saying no? Will you persist even when I'm silent? Will you believe that even crumbs from my table are enough? And the answer is you. No matter how many times you've prayed and heard silence, no matter how many doors have closed, no matter how outside the blessing you feel, you can still approach him, you can still ask, you can still believe that even crumbs are enough. Because the God who crossed into Gentile territory to meet a desperate mother is the same God who crosses every barrier to reach you. He doesn't wait for you to clean up your life. He doesn't demand perfect faith before responding. He doesn't require the right background or the right words. He just asks that you come, that you persist, that you believe even crumbs are enough. When you demonstrate faith like she did, God transforms your story into testimony that encourages others for generations. Her one encounter became a story inspiring millions. Her 7-word response became a lesson echoing through eternity. The mother who never gave up isn't just ancient history, she's you. She's every person who refuses to stop praying, who won't accept no as God's final answer, who believes even the smallest amount of God's power transforms everything. May her story remind you your prayers matter. Your faith, however small it feels, is enough. Your persistence moves God's heart. You don't need perfection. You don't need all the answers. You don't need the right background. You just need to believe that even crumbs are enough. And when you believe that, really believe it, you'll discover that the God who heard a Gentile woman's cry 2,000 years ago hears yours today. The same Jesus who said, "Great is your faith," to an outsider is ready to say it to you. Don't give up. Don't stop praying. Don't accept silence as God's final answer, because even crumbs are enough. And the God whose table you're approaching has more than enough crumbs to transform your impossible situation into testimony of his mercy. God bless you deeply. Until the next story.